Bartini's creation was built to house 12 lift engines for vertical takeoff and landing.
We did secure some footage of the flying disc in the hangar, and it has been designed for humans to fly.
At the peak of history's bloodiest war, a regime gripped the world with terror, through brutality, twisted science, and strange experiments. Yet, beneath the cruelty burned an unrelenting hunger for invention.
Germany were ever evolving in the area of bomb manufacturing. They continued to push the boundaries of what their aircraft could throw at the Allies as the war dragged on.
Though remembered for war crimes, Nazi Germany left behind a legacy more complicated than most know. A cure for a deadly disease, a drug with fatal side effects, and a war machine far ahead of its time. Today, we'll uncover the most unexpected inventions made by Nazi Germany in World War II that you didn't know about. Number 15. The Volkswagen Beetle. Remember the iconic Beetle car that turned heads in the 90s and early 2000s for its rounded, quirky look? Well, it had a much darker origin than most people realize. It was actually the brainchild of Adolf Hitler.
Dr. Ferdinand Porsche designed the KDF wagon, standing for strength through joy, for Hitler.
Back in the 1930s, Hitler had a bold vision. Every German family behind the wheel of a simple, affordable car. He handed the project over to engineer Ferdinand Porsche, commissioning what he called the People's Car, or in German, the Volkswagen. But it wasn't just a car, it was propaganda on wheels, a symbol of progress under the Nazi regime. But then, history intervened. When World War II broke out in 1939, car production stopped. Instead, the same factories began producing military vehicles, many of them using the Beetle's exact chassis and design.
But production of the People's Car had to take a backseat as the still incomplete factory switched over to military manufacturing.
Tanks and troop carriers rolled off the lines where family cars were supposed to be built. Even worse, Germans who had already paid for their Beetles never received them. Their dreams were quietly redirected into fueling the war. When the war ended and Germany was in ruins, the British stepped in and took over the factory. Desperate to find use for the Beetle blueprints, they offered the design to the Allied powers. One by one, each country passed. The Americans laughed it off, said it was too odd, too noisy. The French declined. Even the British passed on it. So the factory was handed back to the Germans, this time under the direction of Heinrich Nordhoff. And that's when everything changed. Under him, the Beetle went from Nazi propaganda to pop culture icon.
And the Volkswagen Beetle became a genuinely international car.
It became one of the best-selling cars in the world, racking up over 21 million sales. Number 14. The first jet fighter. Today, jet fighters are a familiar sight, standard tools of modern warfare. But back in 1944, they were the stuff of nightmares. The mere sight of one was like watching death streak across the sky. And terrifyingly, it was all thanks to the Nazis. In the final desperate months of World War II, Allied pilots began reporting something strange. German aircraft with no propellers, zipping through the clouds at blistering speeds. What they were seeing wasn't science fiction. It was the Messerschmitt Me 262, the first jet-powered fighter in history, and Nazi Germany's last-ditch weapon to claw back control of the war.
Germany in the First and Second World War, Me 262, known to the Germans at the time as the Swallow.
With a sharp, cutting-edge design. At the peak of history's bloodiest war, a regime gripped the world with terror, through brutality, twisted science, and strange experiments. Yet, beneath the cruelty burned an unrelenting hunger for invention. Though remembered for war crimes, Nazi Germany left behind a legacy more complicated than most know. A cure for a deadly disease, a drug with fatal side effects, and a war machine far ahead of its time. Today, we'll uncover the most unexpected inventions made by Nazi Germany in World War II that you didn't know about. Number 15. The Volkswagen Beetle. Remember the iconic Beetle car that turned heads in the 90s?
He said something at one point. He said, well, this device is a box with coils, and I don't like boxes with coils.
'90s and early 2000s for its rounded, quirky look. Well, it had a much darker origin than most people realize. It was actually the brainchild of Adolf Hitler. Back in the 1930s, Hitler had a bold vision. Every German family behind the wheel of a simple, affordable car. He handed the project over to engineer Ferdinand Porsche, commissioning what he called the People's Car, or in German, the Volkswagen. But it wasn't just a car, it was propaganda on wheels, a symbol of progress under the Nazi regime. But then, history intervened. When World War II broke out in 1930, car production stopped. Instead, the same factories began, many of them using the Beetle's exact chassis and design. Tanks and troop carriers rolled off the lines where family cars
The easiest way to think of electron microscope is to start by thinking of a light microscope.
were supposed to be built. Even worse, Germans who had already paid for their Beetles never received them. Their dreams were quietly redirected into fueling the war. When the war ended and Germany was in ruins, the British stepped in and took over the factory. Desperate to find use for the Beetle blueprints, they offered the design to the Allied powers. One by one, each country passed. The Americans laughed it off, said it was too odd, too noisy. The French declined, even the British passed on it. So the factory was handed back to the Germans, this time under the direction of Heinrich Nordhoff. And that's when everything changed. Under him, the Beetle went from Nazi propaganda to pop culture icon. It became one of the best-selling cars in the world, racking up over 21 million sales. Number 4. The first jet fighter. Today, jet fighters are a familiar sight, standard tools of modern warfare. But back in 1944, they were the stuff of nightmares. The mere sight of one was like watching death streak across the sky. And terrifying, it was all thanks to the Nazis. In the final desperate months of World War II, Allied pilots began reporting something strange. German aircraft with no propellers zip through the clouds at blistering speeds. What they were seeing wasn't science fiction. It was the Messerschmitt Me-262, the first jet-powered fighter in history, and Nazi Germany's last-ditch weapon to claw back control of the war. With a sharp, cutting-edge design and twin engines that pushed it to 540 miles per hour, nearly 200 miles faster than any Allied plane, the Me-262 was more than a marvel. It was a predator in the sky. The journey began in 1938 with aircraft designer and engineers Hans von Ohain and Ernst Heinkel. After years of development, the Me-262 finally took flight on July 18, 1992. But just as it was about to change the game, Hitler intervened. Obsessed with building fast bombers, he delayed the fighter's deployment, ordering it converted into a bomber-jet. That delay cost Germany dearly. By the time the Me-262 finally returned to the skies in 1944, the war had turned against the Nazis. But even then, its impact was brutal. It could climb higher, fly faster, and lightning speed. It would attack and vanish before Allied pilots even knew what hit. And yet, despite its power and promise, the Me-262 came too late. Germany was already at the brink of collapse. The jet that could have changed everything arrived.
Examining with infinite care for signs of the most vicious of all the Pacific diseases, malaria.
Arrived just as the clock ran out, leaving behind not victory but a haunting question. What if it had flown into battle 2 years earlier? Number 13. The electron microscope. It was 1931, deep in a Berlin basement lab, not the kind of place where history usually changes. But that's where two German scientists, Ernst Ruska and Max Knoll, were cooking. The drug once dismissed as too dangerous turned out to be incredibly effective. Soldiers who were burning up with fever started recovering. Death rates dropped. Researchers soon found that chloroquine didn't just treat malaria, it blocked the parasite's ability to multiply inside red blood cells. It was one of those strange ironies of history. A regime responsible for unimaginable horrors had accidentally delivered one of the greatest medical breakthroughs of the 20th century. After the war, the story didn't end. It exploded. The drug that began in a Nazi lab became the frontline defense against malaria, saving lives across Africa, Asia, and South America for decades. Number 11. Jerrycan. After the rise of Nazi Germany and just before World War II erupted, the German military faced an unexpected but critical problem. Their fuel cans were terrible. They leaked, they were heavy, and pouring from them was a slow, frustrating mess. So in 1937, a German engineer named Vinzenz Grünvogel set out to fix the issue. What he came up with didn't look like much. A rectangular metal can with 3 handles.
If there's one person, you can carry 2 of them, 1 in each hand. Or, if they're empty, you can easily carry 4 by using these 3 handles.
But it was a game changer. One person could carry it solo using the center handle, or 2 people could grab the outer handles and haul it together without knocking knuckles. It held exactly 20 liters, poured smooth as silk thanks to a smartly designed spout, and had reinforced X shapes stamped into the sides to keep it strong under pressure. The thing was nearly indestructible. Production ramped up fast, and just like that, German troops had the perfect fuel container. It didn't take long for the enemy to notice. On the battlefield, Allied forces started capturing these sleek German cans. They poured easily, didn't leak, and could take a beating, compared to the clunky 5-gallon US cans, which needed tools to open and spilled fuel like crazy. The German version was light years ahead. Troops nicknamed it the jerry can, and it quickly became legend. By the end of the war, the Americans had reverse-engineered the design and began mass-producing their own version, barely tweaking a thing. Why? Because the design didn't need improvement. Almost 80 years later, that same basic jerry can is still in use worldwide.
It's a testament to the fact that almost 80 years later, every element of this design has almost gone completely unchanged.
A simple tool born in wartime that changed the way we move fuel forever. Want more stories like this? Hit the like button, because next we're diving into the drug that nearly wiped out the German army from the inside. Number 10. Pervitin. The terror of Nazi Germany wasn't just unleashed on the world. It turned inward too, haunting its own people. After war broke out, German troops tore through France at a speed no one thought possible. The secret: tiny white pills tucked into their field rations. Pills that would later earn an infamous name on the streets: crystal meth. But back then, it was marketed with a more innocent, friendlier name: Pervitin. Developed by Berlin-based Temmler Pharma, Pervitin hit the civilian market in 1938 as a harmless energy booster. It was sold over the counter to night shift workers, overwhelmed mothers, and students pulling all-nighters. A feel-good pill, easy to swallow. No one saw what was coming. But the German military did. They saw a chance to weaponize sleeplessness, to build an army that never tired. Pervitin didn't just keep soldiers awake, it made them feel invincible, alert, energized, and fearless.
Pervitin was methamphetamine, which in small doses was a useful tool for soldiers as it provided the aforementioned effects.
In April 1940, under what was known as the Stimulant Decree, more than 35 million tablets were shipped to the front lines. Fueled by this chemical edge, Nazi troops stormed through France in a brutal and unstoppable assault. The German military was literally morphed into a sleepless, tireless machine, able to outpace and overwhelm their enemies by sheer endurance. But like every drug story, this one spiraled fast. As the war dragged on and Germany grew more desperate, they pushed even further. Pervitin wasn't enough. Nazi scientists cooked up a new concoction, D9. A brutal mix of methamphetamine, cocaine, and oxycodone. It was tested on prisoners in concentration camps, all in the name of creating the ultimate soldier, a human machine. But the crash was catastrophic. Soldiers began spiraling, hallucinations, breakdowns, total physical collapse. By the end of the war, the German military had bred a generation of addicts, their bodies and minds broken by the very drugs meant to keep them going. And in the years that followed, one thing became brutally clear. What started as a harmless pep pill had evolved into one of the darkest legacies of wartime pharmacology. The story of meth didn't begin in back-alley labs. It began with a war, a pill, and a lie that endurance came without a price. Number 9. Night vision. In the middle of the night, while enemy soldiers stumbled around in the darkness, German troops could see their enemies as clearly as if it were daylight. It sounds impossible, but it was real, and it was terrifying. The device was officially called the Zielgerät 1229, but everyone knew it by its code name, Vampire, one that didn't come by chance. Like a vampire, this weapon hunted in the darkness, and its victims never saw it coming. The system worked by using an active infrared spotlight that would bathe the target area in invisible infrared light, which was then converted back into visible images through an electronic scope. Just like having a flashlight that nobody else could see, but you could see everything. It lit up perfectly. The whole contraption weighed just 5 pounds and was mounted directly onto a German assault rifle, turning an ordinary infantryman into a deadly night predator. The terrifying part? This tool wasn't just some prototype sitting in a lab. It was being used in real combat by February 1945, when most of the world didn't even know such technology was possible. For the Germans, this new edge did not stop with handheld devices. They equipped more than 300 tanks with these massive infrared searchlights, giving them the ability to see up to 600 meters in complete darkness. Imagine being an enemy, thinking you're safely hidden in the night, when suddenly a German Panther tank starts firing at you with perfect accuracy from hundreds of meters away. You couldn't see them, but they could see you as clear as day. This technology was so advanced that it wouldn't become common in other armies until decades later. The fact that Nazi Germany was mass-producing and deploying this equipment while their cities were being bombed and their supply lines were crumbling shows just how desperately innovative they had become. Number 8. Particle board. In a desperate move to create more raw materials for the war, Max Himmelheber sparked a revolution in 1932, one that would go on to shape the future of the furniture industry. He discovered a method for creating particle board without fully saturating wood fibers with adhesive, and it involved transforming industrial wastes like planer shavings, sawdust, and wood offcuts into strong, uniform panels. To do this, all the wastes were broken down into chips of various sizes and then sorted into 3 layers based on their size and appearance. The rougher chips would go in the middle of the panel, where they would remain hidden, while the finer chips would form the outer layer for aesthetics. This saved time and eliminated waste at the same time, and so it quickly became an option. After the war, Himmelheber's particle board invention went beyond wartime and became the foundation for modern wood and furniture making. But only a few realized they're surrounded by the invention of a German fighter pilot who, between aerial combat missions, found a way to make discarded wood scraps as valuable as solid timber. Number 7. Audio tape. While engineers toiled over rockets and radar, a quieter revolution that transformed every recording studio, radio station, and bedroom stereo system across the globe was unfolding in the laboratories. As German cities faced attacks and bomb blasts, communication within the country faced a hurdle, but somehow Hitler seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to broadcast live speeches from multiple cities at the same time, while he was supposedly hundreds of miles away. The secret was the magnetophone, the world's first practical magnetic tape recorder developed by German engineers in the 1930s. Hitler exploited this technology masterfully, performing what appeared to be live broadcasts from one city while he was actually in another, creating an illusion of omnipresence that baffled the enemy.
German compatriots, the German ports were nothing but ship cemeteries.
By 1941, the Germans had perfected a recording technology that only gave them enhanced capabilities for communications and propaganda. The magnetophone wasn't just capturing sound, it was bending reality itself, allowing the Nazi regime to manipulate time and space through the simple act of recording and playback. When the smoke of war finally cleared, investigators from victorious enemy forces stumbled upon this treasure, and military intelligence in both the US and UK quickly realized that the magnetophone had been substantially refined during the war years to create a vastly superior product than they had known. American audio engineer Jack Mullin acquired 2 suitcase-sized magnetophone high-fidelity recorders and 50 reels of recording tape.
This is one of the 2 magnetophones that I sent home from Paris at the end of the war,
shipping them home where he worked for the next 2 years to reverse engineer this German marvel.
And when I got home, I reassembled them. The hardest part was sending this box that the apparatus is in. It was the biggest single item.
What emerged from those captured machines wasn't just technology, it was the genesis of modern recording culture, the foundation upon which every mixtape, podcast, and studio album would eventually rest. Number 6. Polyurethane. What started as an ambitious experiment to create synthetic materials for a war-hungry nation would inadvertently birth one of the most versatile substances ever conceived. In 1937, a young scientist named Otto Bayer stumbled upon something extraordinary while working for IG Farben. He realized that by combining 2 seemingly ordinary chemicals, an isocyanate and a polyol, the mixture doesn't blend, but instead it transforms into an entirely new material that's flexible yet strong, lightweight yet durable. He's just invented polyurethane, though he doesn't yet realize he's created one of the most revolutionary materials of the 20th century. Bayer and co-workers at IG Farben discovered and patented the chemistry of polyurethane, and this discovery would eventually touch nearly every aspect of modern life, from the foam in your mattress to the soles of your shoes. Even more fascinating was the timing of this invention and the circumstances, because the nation was gearing up for what would become the most devastating war in human history. Bayer's polyurethane discovery came at a time when German scientists were desperately trying to replace natural rubber, which was in critically short supply. The new material showed promise as a synthetic alternative, though the full wartime applications wouldn't be realized until later in the conflict. Today, decades later, you probably interact with polyurethane dozens of times every day without even knowing it. It's in your car seats, your running shoes, your kitchen sponges, and even your smartphone case. But the knowledge that what started as a wartime experiment in a Nazi-era laboratory has become one of the most versatile materials ever created is both weird and scary. Number 5. Anti-ship missiles. Imagine you're a sailor in the 1940s standing on the deck of a warship somewhere out on the sea, and then suddenly you see something that shouldn't exist. A bomb with wings flying straight at your ship, controlled by an enemy pilot miles away like some kind of deadly remote-controlled toy. This was the Henschel H-293, and it was about to change warfare forever. This beast was a World War II German radio-guided glide bomb.
Henschel 293 was a quite different weapon. This was for use against unarmored ships, and it was for use against merchant ships.
The first operational anti-shipping missile, first used successfully on August 25, 1943, and then with increasing success over the next year, damaging or sinking at least 25 ships. The Germans had just invented the world's first anti-ship missile. To create this, German engineers had taken a 500-kilogram bomb packed with high explosives and basically strapped wings to it, along with a small rocket engine that would fire for exactly 10 seconds to give it that extra push. The wildest part? They mounted a tiny radio receiver inside this flying bomb, connected to moving fins that could steer it left, right, up, or down.
The operator inside the aircraft had a little joystick controller, steer the missile to fly down the line of sight in what he did in effect.
The pilot of the bomber would release this mechanical beast from several miles away, then use a joystick to guide it toward its target while watching through binoculars or a small telescope. The missile would glide through the air like a sinister metal bird, adjusting its flight path based on radio signals until it slammed into the side of an unsuspecting ship with devastating force. The terror it brought after its release was because, for the first time in naval history, enemy ships could be attacked from distances so great that the attacking aircraft might not even be visible on the horizon. The Germans deployed these missiles with increasing success between 1943 and 44, and the enemy was so desperate to stop them that they developed the first electronic warfare jamming systems just to interfere with the radio signals controlling these flying nightmares. The age of smart weapons had begun, and it started with Nazi Germany turning bombs into remote-controlled angels of death. Number 4. Fanta. Businesses mostly took hits during the war, and even the most famous soft drink company was not spared during the Second World War. The Coca-Cola Company had been selling their famous cola in Germany since the 1920s, and business was booming. But when America entered the war and trade embargoes kicked in, the German branch of Coca-Cola found itself in a pickle. They couldn't get the secret syrup concentrate from Atlanta anymore, the very essence that made Coke what it was. The German operations manager, a guy named Max Keith, got creative, and that creativity gave birth to something completely unexpected. Keith and his team started scrounging around for whatever ingredients they could find in wartime Germany. Sugar was rationed, exotic fruits were impossible to get, but they managed to gather apple fiber, leftover fruit pulp from jam factories, and whatever sweet scraps they could legally obtain. They mixed these odds and ends together, added some flavoring, carbonated water, and voila, a brand new orange-flavored soda. They needed a name, so during a company brainstorming session, Keith told his employees to use their Fanta, which meant their imagination. One employee shouted out, "Fanta!" and the name stuck. This wartime substitute became wildly popular across Germany, not because it was amazing, but because it was one of the few sweet treats people could still enjoy during those dark years. The touching part: after the war ended, Coca-Cola took back control of their German operations, looked at this orange soda that had kept its business alive, and decided to keep it. That makeshift wartime drink, born from desperation and apple scraps, eventually became one of the world's most popular soft drinks, sold in nearly 200 countries today. Number 3. Assault rifle. In the heat of the war, German soldiers on the Eastern Front faced a deadly problem. Their standard-issue rifles were powerful but slow to fire, and their submachine guns were great up close but useless beyond 100 yards. They were getting hammered by Soviet troops armed with fast-firing submachine guns in close combat, while also facing the deadly accuracy of rifles at long range. That's when a relatively unknown engineer named Hugo Schmeisser and his team at Haenel came up with the Sturmgewehr 44, literally meaning assault rifle in German.
But I think we can agree that the STG-44 was the first assault rifle that was successfully deployed on a mass scale.
This wasn't just another gun. It was the world's first true assault rifle, and it happened almost by accident. Hitler himself initially hated the idea, so the engineers did something incredibly bold by lying to him. They called it a machine carbine and kept developing it in secret, even as resources were running desperately low in Nazi Germany. When it finally made it to the battlefield, German soldiers could now spray bullets like a machine gun in close quarters, then switch to precise single shots for distant targets, all with the same weapon.
between the size and power of a pistol and a rifle cartridge is what made the design of the STG-44.
The Allies were caught completely off guard, having nothing like it, although only about 425,000 were produced before Germany's defeat. This revolutionary weapon would inspire every modern assault rifle that followed, from the AK-47 to the M16. In a twisted irony of history, one of Nazi Germany's most lasting contributions to the world was a weapon that would arm countless armies for decades to come, long after the Third Reich had crumbled to dust. Number 2. Jägermeister.
You can make drinks, any classic drinks, like an old-fashioned Manhattan or Negroni with Jägermeister.
Businessman Kurt Mast stirred up something legendary in 1935, but not for the reasons you'd expect. Created 2 years earlier as part of a family business, Jägermeister was named to curry favor with Hermann Göring, who had just been appointed imperial gamekeeper for the new Third Reich. The name Jägermeister literally means master of the hunt, and Mast wasn't just being poetic, he was being politically savvy. Göring, Hitler's right-hand man and aviation chief, had just taken on this grand hunting title, and Mast figured flattery might be good for business. However, Göring became famous as the Jägermeister that the German people called Jägermeister Göring Schnapps instead. But the herbal liqueur didn't just sit on shelves during the war. It was used by German soldiers as an anesthetic, disinfectant, and to clean wounds because proper medical supplies were running low. The 56 herbs and spices that gave Jägermeister its distinctive bite suddenly had a darker, more practical purpose on the battlefield.
Well, you know what's crazy is you never realize Jaeger is made up of everything that's all over the world.
What started as a businessman's attempt to butter up Nazi officials ended up in the field packs of Wehrmacht soldiers, serving double duty as both liquid courage and makeshift medicine in the chaos of World War II. Number 1. Methadone. Deep inside one of Nazi Germany's most powerful chemical conglomerates, two scientists create something that would outlive the Third Reich by decades. Gustav Erhardt and Max Bockmuehl were just trying to solve a wartime problem, finding a painkiller that worked without having to depend on morphine. What they ended up cooking up in their lab was methadone, the world's first fully synthetic opioid, a drug that would eventually become both a blessing and a curse for millions of people around the world. Quicker than normal, the Nazi scientists quickly abandoned their creation because the early trials went horribly wrong. Patients who had received massive doses experienced terrible side effects. But it wasn't until after Germany's defeat that American forces discovered this forgotten formula in the ruins of the IG Farben facilities. The Americans didn't even realize they had stumbled upon a narcotic painkiller at first. It took until 1949 before methadone hit the German pharmaceutical market, and by the 1960s, this Nazi-era invention had found its most famous purpose, helping heroin addicts kick their habit through methadone maintenance therapy. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.